The moment that defined everything was not dramatic. There was no argument, no raised voice, no visible crack in the surface. It was simply the instant I stepped through the front door of my fiancé's childhood home and watched his mother decide who I was in less than a breath. Her eyes moved the way experienced women's eyes do. Shoes to bag, fabric to posture. The pause was brief but final. I felt the judgment settle, clean and complete, like a stamp pressed onto paper. In that moment, I knew something important. They had mistaken me for someone simple, and they would never question it. My name is Elowen Hart. The house itself was impressive in the way money always is when it wants to be noticed. Wide entryway, heavy wood furniture, framed photos arranged carefully to show success without warmth. His father stood near the fireplace with the posture of a man accustomed to being deferred to. His mother smiled in a way that suggested kindness, but carried inventory underneath it. They welcomed me politely, warmly even, but their tone shifted just enough to signal hierarchy. I was not an equal entering their home. I was a project, a curiosity, something to be assessed and improved. I have always lived below my means, not because I had to, but because I chose to. Simple clothes that fit well, a modest car that never drew attention, an apartment that was clean and quiet and mine. I learned early that visibility attracts expectation, and expectation attracts entitlement. So I kept my life small on purpose. That night, it worked beautifully. I wore a soft sweater, no jewelry worth noticing, nothing that asked to be remembered. I let humility do the talking, because humility is often mistaken for limitation. At dinner, my fiancé mentioned casually that I was still finding my footing. He said it lightly, like a detail that did not matter. His parents nodded with visible relief. That phrase unlocked everything. His mother leaned forward and began offering advice about saving, about patience, about how ambition takes time. His father asked what I planned to do eventually, once I figured things out. Eventually, one day, I smiled and listened. I did not correct a single assumption. Silence can be a very useful thing when other people are eager to fill it for you. The comments grew more confident as the evening went on. His mother insisted on paying for dinner, framing it as kindness while making sure I noticed. His father spoke about responsibility as if he were offering a lesson I had never encountered. They spoke down to me gently at first, then more openly, comfortable in their certainty. I noted every word, not with anger, with clarity. Micro-insults are easy to miss when you are busy defending yourself. I was not busy. I was paying attention. They never asked real questions. They never wondered why I was calm, why I did not fidget, why I did not rush to impress them. They saw what they expected to see, and expectation is a powerful blindfold. The more they spoke, the more convinced they became of their generosity, their wisdom, their role in lifting me up. My fiancé watched it all without interruption, not maliciously, just comfortably. That comfort told me more than anything else could have. There was a moment near the end of the night when his mother patted my hand and told me everything would work out if I stayed grateful and patient. Her voice was gentle, her smile sincere. I thanked her and meant it, though not for the reason she assumed. I had already decided to marry their son. I just had not decided yet what role they would play in my life after that. I am careful about how much of myself I reveal, even now. Not because I am hiding out of shame, but because mystery has always been one of my safest advantages. People behave very differently when they believe they understand you. They relax, they simplify you, they stop checking their assumptions. That is when the truth has room to move. What I do for a living has never sounded impressive at dinner parties. I work in consulting, but I rarely use the word unless I have to. I deal with numbers, systems, strategy, the quiet architecture behind decisions that look effortless once they are made. I help companies see what they refuse to see on their own. The work pays well precisely because it is invisible. If done correctly, no one notices it happened. I learned early that success spoken aloud invites hands to reach for it, so I keep mine folded neatly out of sight. His parents never asked for details. They heard enough to confirm their story of me. Vague career, modest habits, no visible appetite for luxury. That version of me fit perfectly into the role they wanted filled. A nice girl, a grateful girl, someone who would be impressed by their generosity and molded by their guidance. I let them keep that version. It cost me nothing. The test came quietly. His mother arrived one afternoon with a box of cookware she no longer needed. Still good, she said. No sense wasting it. I accepted it with a smile and thanked her. His sister laughed one night over drinks and joked that I was marrying up. She meant it playfully. I laughed too. His father asked if I would be open to signing a prenuptial agreement to protect their son, as if he were doing me a kindness by framing it that way. I agreed instantly, no hesitation, no offense taken. The room softened when I said yes, and that told me everything I needed to know. That moment mattered more than any argument could have. Agreement disarmed them. It confirmed their belief that I needed structure, protection, oversight. My fiancé glanced at me with surprise and relief, then said nothing else. He never did. He was not unkind. He was simply comfortable. Comfortable letting his parents speak for him. Comfortable letting them believe he was the provider and I was the project. Comfort can erode loyalty faster than cruelty ever could. The first dinner where money became a real conversation happened not long after. We were seated at a long table, plates half cleared, wine poured generously. His parents began discussing the wedding budget as if I were an item already accounted for. They set limits, suggested compromises, mentioned what made sense for people at our stage. I nodded at the appropriate moments and thanked them for their generosity. No one asked what I thought was reasonable. No one wondered why I did not object. They mistook my calm for compliance. Privately, I was taking notes, not literal ones, mental markers. Who spoke first, who deferred, who assumed authority. Power dynamics reveal themselves most clearly when money enters the room. I have always lived by one rule, and it has never failed me. Never interrupt someone who is underestimating you. People tell you everything when they think they are superior. They expose their values, their fears, their expectations. They show you exactly how they will treat you once they believe you belong to them. All you have to do is listen and wait. By the time his parents insisted the wedding be hosted at their country club, I understood the shape of the game entirely. They spoke about it with pride, as if it were a gift, a prestigious favor, a gesture of inclusion. I agreed easily, too easily. I watched relief spread across their faces as they checked another box, confident they were steering the future in the right direction. I smiled, thanked them, and accepted. What they did not know, what they never thought to ask, was how well I already knew that place. Once the venue was decided, everything accelerated. His parents moved with the confidence of people who believed they were doing me a favor by taking control. Vendors were selected without my input. Guest lists were adjusted to include people I had never met but was expected to be grateful for. Seating charts were discussed as if I were a junior employee being briefed on a plan already finalized. They spoke slowly, carefully, like you do when you want to be sure someone keeps up. I let them. I smiled, nodded, and thanked them for including me. My fiancé told me I was lucky. He said it more than once. Lucky his parents cared so much. Lucky they wanted to help. Lucky they were willing to take the burden off my shoulders. He never noticed how often the word help replaced the word choice. When I pointed out small details, he told me not to stress. When I stayed quiet, he seemed relieved. Comfort, again. That familiar, quiet erosion. The comments sharpened as the planning went on. His mother mentioned my budget dress in front of the florist, laughing lightly as if it were an inside joke. His father suggested I practice mingling before the reception since their crowd could be intimidating. At a cocktail party, they introduced me as sweet and simple, the way you might describe a pleasant accessory. People smiled kindly at me, the way you smile at someone you assume will not matter later. There were moments when even I could feel the air tightening, moments when silence pressed against my ribs, and the audience in my life expected me to speak, to defend myself, to correct the narrative. I did not. Instead, I leaned further into the version of me they needed to believe in. I asked questions that made me sound uncertain. I deferred to opinions I already understood. I let them explain concepts I could have taught in my sleep. Nothing makes people more confident than believing they are educating you. Behind the scenes, I prepared. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quiet preparation does not leave fingerprints. Contracts were reviewed carefully. Ownership structures were clarified in language that sounded protective, benevolent. Documents were signed with smiles and reassurances because they believed they were safeguarding their son from my inexperience. No one questions paperwork when it flatters their sense of authority. They did not see strategy. They saw compliance. The suffocation was gradual. That was the most effective part. There was no single moment I could point to and call cruel, just 1,000 small acts of erasure stacked neatly on top of one another. Decisions made without me, jokes made about me, plans made for me. The walls closed in softly, padded with good intentions and polite smiles. Anyone watching from the outside would have called it generosity. Anyone inside it could feel the air thinning. My fiancé never noticed the difference between gratitude and patience. He mistook my calm for acceptance, my silence for trust. He never asked why I stopped offering opinions. He never wondered why I stopped caring about details that once mattered. He simply enjoyed the ease of being carried forward by other people's certainty. The night before the wedding, his mother asked me to sit with her in the living room. The house was quiet, lights low, the kind of intimate setting people use when they believe they are imparting wisdom. She held my hand and spoke softly about loyalty, about remembering who lifted me up, about knowing my place within a family that had done so much for me already. Her voice was gentle, her smile sincere. I listened carefully. Every word mattered. When she finished, she squeezed my hand and told me she was proud of how gracious I had been through all of this, how easy I was to work with, how grateful I seemed. I thanked her sincerely. She had no idea how literal my gratitude was. The morning of the wedding arrived clear and bright, the kind of day people describe as a good omen. The country club sat exactly as I remembered it, white stone against manicured green, familiar in a way no one there could possibly imagine. I stepped through the front doors slowly, taking in the scent of polished wood and citrus cleaner, the quiet efficiency of staff preparing for an event they believed they understood. I watched recognition ripple across a few faces before being carefully smoothed away. A server greeted me by name, not my fiancé's last name, mine. The pause that followed was almost imperceptible, but I felt it settle into the room like a held breath. The reveal did not happen all at once. It never does when the truth is structural rather than theatrical. It unfolded in pieces. A glance held a moment too long, a quiet correction spoken under breath. The club manager approached and asked me to confirm final arrangements. Not out of courtesy, out of habit. I nodded, answered calmly, and moved on. Somewhere behind me, confusion began to gather momentum. People started noticing the plaque near the main hall, the one donors rarely look at because it has always been there. My family name caught the light just long enough for recognition to click, then whisper, then recalculation. I watched the shift happen in real time as the room reoriented itself around information that could no longer be ignored. His parents felt it next. His mother's smile tightened as she tried to correct the narrative, laughing lightly, making introductions louder than necessary. She spoke as if volume could reclaim control. It could not. His father grew quiet. He recognized the pattern before the rest of them did. Contracts, ownership structures, protections he thought were safeguards had been signatures that locked everything into place. He looked at me with something close to disbelief, not because I had changed, but because he realized he never actually knew me at all. My fiancé stood frozen near the entrance, staring at me like a stranger. The comfort he had relied on for so long drained from his posture. I could see the moment understanding reached him, not anger, not betrayal, something colder, the awareness that he had benefited from assumptions he never bothered to question. That realization cost him everything. I did not speak. I did not explain. There was nothing to explain. Every answer they wanted was already embedded in the room. Exposure does not require narration. It requires patience. The ceremony did not proceed, not with shouting, not with chaos. It ended clinically, like a process halted mid-step once a fundamental error is discovered. Plans dissolved quietly. Guests stood unsure of where to look. Staff waited for instruction that never came. I collected my things with steady hands and thanked the people who deserved it. Respect was returned where it had always existed. I walked away with what mattered: control, dignity, truth. The destruction was complete precisely because it was impersonal. No accusations to argue with, no emotions to discredit. Just facts finally visible to everyone who had chosen not to see them before. There was no shadow left to hide in, no sympathetic angle, no redemption arc waiting in the wings. I paused once at the doors, not to look back, but to let the moment settle. Silence filled the room behind me, heavy and absolute, as people realized exactly who they had misjudged. After everything settled, there was no dramatic fallout to savor, no victory lap, no appetite for watching anyone suffer. Consequences arrived quietly, the way they always do when they are deserved. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. The carefully arranged hierarchy that once spoke over me corrected itself without my involvement. Distance formed naturally, not out of bitterness, but necessity. When power dynamics are exposed, proximity becomes uncomfortable for everyone who benefited from them. I did not seek closure from any of them. I did not need apologies that would only exist to ease their own discomfort. His parents avoided my name in conversation, then avoided the conversations entirely. My former fiancé tried once to explain himself, to frame his silence as confusion rather than choice. I listened long enough to understand that he still believed comfort excused inaction. It did not. It never had. I wished him well and walked away with the same calm I had carried through the entire unraveling. What surprised people most was how little I seemed changed by it all. They expected sharp edges, vindictiveness, a hunger for acknowledgement. Instead, I returned to my life exactly as it had always been, quiet and intentional. I worked, I rested, I moved forward. The absence of spectacle unsettled those who had been waiting for it. They wanted proof of damage. There was none they could claim. With time, I began to understand why stories like this repeat so often, why they resonate even when the details differ. Betrayal rarely announces itself loudly. It usually arrives wrapped in politeness, disguised as help, reinforced by tradition and expectation. Underestimation is the most reliable weapon people hand to you willingly, especially when it flatters their sense of superiority. They do not guard against someone they believe needs them. Revenge is a word people misunderstand. They imagine destruction, humiliation, fireworks. But the most complete form of revenge is absence. It is letting people experience the natural outcome of their assumptions without interference. It is refusing to correct the narrative until the narrative collapses under its own weight. I did not ruin anyone. I stepped aside and let gravity do the work. There is a particular peace that comes from watching consequences unfold without your fingerprints on them. It is clean. It leaves no residue. You do not have to relive it later or justify it to yourself in quiet moments. You simply recognize it for what it is: resolution. I have been asked if I regret not speaking sooner, not asserting myself earlier, not demanding respect at the first sign of it being withheld. The answer is simple. No, respect demanded is rarely respected. Respect revealed is permanent. The version of me they dismissed was the version they needed in order to show me exactly who they were. I listened, I waited, I learned. This story is finished, completely. There are no loose ends, no unanswered questions worth revisiting. The people involved have gone on to live the lives their choices built for them. I have done the same, but the pattern remains. It plays out in offices and families and relationships every day. In rooms where someone speaks last and is assumed to understand least. In situations where politeness is mistaken for weakness and silence is mistaken for absence. Those stories do not always end publicly. Many resolve quietly, inside the person who finally recognizes the power of being underestimated. The gavel fell. Silence. Release.